Hi, I'm Steph, and thank you for checking out my channel and watching this video. I appreciate it. So I want to talk about how I think that Better Call Saul is a much better show than Breaking Bad. So this video is going to contain spoilers for both shows. So if you don't like the spoilers, then maybe watch the shows and then come back. So we recently finished Better Call Saul. It had its 6th season and final season this year. And then we went back and rewatched Breaking Bad, and I really think that Better Call Saul is a much better TV show. I'll tell you why. In fact, I feel like Breaking Bad is really quite difficult to watch. I don't think I will ever go back and rewatch it again. It's a lot more sexual in content than I had remembered, and watching Walter White, who is not an anti-hero, guys, he's a straight-up villain. Watching him abuse and break Jesse Pinkman is actually kind of painful. Jesse Pinkman is really the only one of the main characters who is like a truly good guy. Yes, he sells drugs, which is bad. But when it comes to like killing people to get what they want or to protect their business interests or whatever, or lying, he stands out as like the only character who doesn't want to go that way. And I feel like Aaron Paul did a stellar job portraying Jesse Pinkman as sympathetic and emotional and deeply affected by the evil being done around him. When he got clean and was off the drugs, like the audience cheered for him, and then when he started using again, it made us all feel bad. Even Skylar White, who is supposed to be like a foil for Walter, I guess, she isn't all she's cracked up to be. She doesn't like fully support murder, but she kind of weirdly accepts the worst things that Walter does. I realize that late in the show, she's afraid of him, and she does become sort of like a prisoner. And I sympathize with that. And she doesn't feel like she has any alternative except to help him launder his money and just continue on. But I feel like when she found out what he was doing, she hit like the big old fork in the road, and she could have told Hank. She could have left Walter and been done with him. Instead, she slept with her boss in an act of like passive-aggressive revenge, which I don't know. I don't think she's the worst, obviously, but I feel like she's not as bad as Walter, but she's not like that great of a person either. So Breaking Bad won awards, and it was lauded as this amazing show, and it is a really well-written show. It's enthralling, but honestly, after this rewatch, like, I just felt like I needed a shower. The show's really gross. And I don't just mean because we're constantly seeing Walter White in his tidy whities. There are dumb decisions made, evil things that people participate in and perpetuate on each other, and it's just kind of disgusting. And it really just left me feeling kind of gross. And I don't intend to go back and rewatch Breaking Bad again. I kind of, as we were watching it, there were days when I was like, I don't know if I want to keep going. Like, it's a kind of a miserable show. So Better Call Saul has its own share of bad deeds being done, but while Jimmy McGill goes down kind of a dark path, I feel like he's never quite as wicked as Walter White. He's a fairly standard, slimy lawyer, and he and Kim Wexler, his girlfriend and sometimes partner, definitely do some things that like most of us would never do. But the show manages to walk this line of making us like Jimmy or Saul, he's called both, where honestly we've never really come to like Walter White. Breaking Bad kind of seems to aim at having the audience root for Walter, but I just couldn't get there. So one major difference for me between the two shows is the overall feeling that I got as I was watching them. Even at its darkest, Better Call Saul didn't leave me feeling dirty. Many of the same actors return for Better Call Saul. It's funny because they're all older because it was made after Breaking Bad, but you know, they're trying to convince us that they were younger. And for the most part, you can suspend your disbelief and just go with it. I liked the additions of Michael Mando as Ignacio Nacho Varga and Ray Seahorn as Kim Wexler. I feel like both of them really elevate this show. They take it to a place where like Breaking Bad just didn't have a chance of getting there. I love Kim's character. I think she's really well written and really well acted. She's a strong woman without having any of the modern stupidity of strong female characters. She's smart and funny and unpredictable. She's really brave. Sometimes she makes big mistakes and sometimes she does bad things. She's as far as from like a Mary Sue as you can get. And that makes her realistic and authentic. Real strong women are full of flaws and emotions, and we do dumb things, and sometimes we even do the wrong thing. And Kim Wexler, I think, is one of the best female characters that I've ever seen on television. Like, she's an amazing character, and Ray Seahorn really just nails it. And in contrast, I feel like Skylar White was written to be, like I said, like a foil for Walter, but that's her whole character. She's either fighting him or being victimized by him. And even when she's at her most sympathetic, for some reason she's still kind of unlikable, which is odd. I think it comes down to the show being written in a way that they're trying to manipulate the audience to support Walter. Where Kim Wexler is her own thing. The audience often doesn't know why she does the things that she does. Sometimes she makes these decisions that we all are like, what is she doing and why is she doing that? And that keeps us in suspense. She loves Jimmy, Saul, and this ends up kind of being to her detriment. She takes care of him and he takes care of her. Although it is interesting that, as far as I can remember, they don't say the words "I love you" until, spoiler, Kim leaves Jimmy. So Breaking Bad for me wasn't as emotionally engaging as Better Call Saul. Breaking Bad like drags the audience through this ugly, vile world of Walter and the Mexican drug cartels. And Jesse is the only really likable character that we feel emotions for. We suffer for that because Jesse is tortured. He's like put through hell. And I don't think the audience really connects emotionally to any other character. Maybe Walter Jr., but his role is fairly small. But Better Call Saul builds these characters. It's more of a character-driven show. And it builds them slowly enough that we do feel an emotional connection to both Jimmy, Saul, I don't know which one you want me to call him, but whatever, and Kim, and Nacho. I think that Michael Mando should have won all the awards for Best Supporting Actor. I feel like he did so much with the character of Nacho, and a lot of the things that he managed to convey weren't even in the dialogue. There are moments when the camera's on him and he isn't saying a thing, but the audience knows exactly what is happening in his head. We get the subtext and we really feel what he's feeling. He is a Jesse Pinkman-like character. He's a young guy who finds himself kind of entrenched in the drug world much more deeply than he ever wanted to be. He struggles with wanting to get out, which of course is near impossible to do. But he doesn't quite know how to say no to these big bosses. He wants to protect his father. And I feel like Michael Mando absolutely sells us on Nacho's pain and terror and anguish. And his final scene is like astoundingly good. I mean, it's so, he is so good in that show, in Better Call Saul. And the series also gives us time to really get to know Kim and Jimmy. Watching Jimmy go through defeat and frustration and trying to care for his increasingly mentally ill brother makes us really sympathize with him. Do we agree with all of his choices? No. Especially as the show progresses and things get a little crazy. But we have an understanding of what has made him into the man who is making those choices. Where I feel like Walter White, even from the beginning, was kind of narcissistic and like, yes, we know he had cancer and he wants to provide for his family when he's gone, and he decides that making and selling meth is the way to do it. But I feel like that's not really sympathetic. Like, we don't see, he's like a sociopath almost, you know. There's not a lot of true, deep affection for his family. There are moments where you see what appears to be that, but when it comes down to it, Walter's motivations are very self-centered. Everything he does is really for him. It's about power. It's about, you know, vengeance. It's about being the best at making the blue meth. But I feel like with Jimmy, like we really have a reason to sympathize with him. And like when his brother Chuck dies in a house fire, It's clear that Jimmy is wrestling with guilt and grief. All of his life he had lived in Chuck's shadow, and Chuck had found great success in the law, where Jimmy skimped and limped along trying to build his career, and ended up kind of being known as this, kind of slimy character. And as for Kim, we don't really figure her out completely by the end of the show, but I think we definitely feel for her. We can see that she genuinely cares for Jimmy, and she truly wants to make a good life with him. So watching them devolve, especially in the final season, is fascinating. Ray Seahorn gives this superb performance. She's a really compelling actress. Like Michael Mando, she communicates so much without saying a word. We really feel her conflict and her frustration and her fear and, all of these big things, and how they're affecting her deep down beneath just whatever the dialogue is. So I feel Better Call Saul is a relatively clean show. There isn't really a sex scene until the end of the final season, and then it's off screen and mostly overheard. There is some language, there is some sexual content related to some of Jimmy's clients and things like that. It's not a squeaky clean show, but there's not a lot of nudity until the final season. For whatever reason, they decided we needed to see Bob Odenkirk's rear end a handful of times, so that was odd. But that's TV shows, I guess. So the final season actually is a little odd overall. Some things land better than others. Some of the things that Jimmy does cross over into bizarre, almost fantasy level craziness. His reasons become clear, but Jimmy Saul is revealed to be a little bit more dastardly than we might have thought. He's very manipulative, and he uses people. And all throughout the show, there are these flash forwards. And in the last season, a lot of this culminates, and we watch him spiral into this identity crisis. And instead of laying low, he starts taking chances and doing things that potentially could get him caught. So I feel like one of the best decisions that the creators and writers of Better Call Saul made was not to try to remake Breaking Bad. This is its own show from start to finish, and I think it works largely because of this. It's both a spin-off and a prequel. And there are some scenes of Saul, like I said, that are future flash forwards that are post Breaking Bad in the timeline. And they're peppered in to keep you wondering about what's coming at the end. As for the endings of these two shows, I think Breaking Bad's ending is fine. I liked that Jesse got away. And Walter, as far as we know, died on the floor of the drug lab, which is fitting and maybe better than he deserved. Like I said, I didn't really love watching this show, so it's hard to say I loved the ending, but I think it was fitting. For the most part, it was fine. Better Call Saul, and here are going to be some bigger spoilers if you haven't watched the final season yet. It ends after the events of Breaking Bad. Some years have passed in between, and a lot of things happen leading up to the ending that are really important. Jimmy and Kim have been playing some small con games over the years, both of them kind of doing this because they enjoy the thrill. But Jimmy/Saul's involvement with the drug cartel, the Mexican cartel, starts to cause some big problems, and ultimately some things happen that Kim would probably never have been involved with if she hadn't been in a relationship with Jimmy. So in their last big con, Jimmy and Kim are messing with their former coworker, big-time lawyer Howard Hamlin. He comes to their house, or condo, apartment, whatever it is, to confront them. And again, some big spoilers coming up here. He happens to be there when the big bad guy of this show, of Better Call Saul, named Lalo Salamanca, who is played brilliantly by Tony Dalton. So he shows up. He sneaks into the apartment. And the audience didn't know he was going there, so it was a big surprise to us, and it was a huge surprise to Jimmy and Kim. Lalo is a really scary guy, primarily because he's super violent and completely unpredictable. You never know when he's going to shoot somebody in the head and when he's going to walk away and let them live. He's terrifying. So he walks into the apartment, and because Howard's there and he wants to talk to Jimmy and Kim, he shoots Howard in the head. And this leads to a series of really traumatic incidents, which ultimately I think push Kim to the edge. And she realizes, in the course of a couple of episodes that she can't live with Jimmy anymore. And that if she doesn't leave, then, these terrible things are going to continue to happen. And I think they feel largely responsible for Howard's death, even though they weren't the ones who pulled the trigger. They were the reason that he was there. So she ends up breaking it off with Jimmy. She moves to Florida and she quits practicing law. And Jimmy, meanwhile, in the timeline of the two shows, this is when he continued along with Walter White until he reached his own breaking point. And then he changed his identity and ran away. So in a flash forward, for the last handful of episodes, we see Kim in Florida. And she's living basically like an alternate life. It's a completely different life than we saw her live through all 5.5 seasons of the show leading up to this. Her hair is darker. She behaves differently. She's less self-possessed. She seems a lot more willing to just defer to others rather than taking the lead, which is really different for her. She is a really different person. This is another aspect of Ray Seahorn's amazing performance. She manages to play Kim pretending to be someone she's not, like a character within a character. She seems detached, like she's resigned to her new life, although she doesn't seem super happy about it. So as the show nears its finale, Kim does begin to volunteer at the local legal aid, which is maybe a clue that she's coming back to herself, and maybe ready to start making her way back to the Kim Wexler that she knows she is. So Jimmy Saul, under a pseudonym, spends some years in Wisconsin managing a Cinnabon. And ultimately, big spoiler, he does end up getting caught, which is really caused by his own hubris. He messed with the wrong old lady, Carol Burnett, in a great, I don't know if you'd call it a cameo. She was in more than one episode, but she does a great job as this older lady that Jimmy kind of cons, and he uses her son in a series of robberies. So the police catch him, and he's expedited to New Mexico, and he's brought to trial. And the final scenes of the show are of Jimmy in the courtroom, and it is set up in a way that you don't know what he's going to do. There's sort of a threat that he's going to implicate Kim in his crimes, and that she's going to have to, have her own trial. But then he ends up confessing to everything in the final episode, and he accepts his jail sentence. So basically, the ending of Better Call Saul is the opposite of the ending of Breaking Bad, because he takes responsibility and he takes the consequences of his actions. Although, who knows what would have happened if he hadn't got caught? He did try to flee from the police, so there are some what ifs that aren't covered. These are the reasons that I think Better Call Saul is a better show. I feel like it's better written, better acted. I feel like the arc of the characters is superior. I feel like it's a lot more sympathetic show, and I feel like it's not quite as, like, you don't feel gross after watching it, which for me matters. Breaking Bad just is full of content that I don't want to see and don't want to think about, and like I said, I probably won't go back and rewatch that one, but I may go back and rewatch Better Call Saul in a couple of years. There's a really great podcast which is hosted by Better Call Saul show editors Chris McCaleb and Kelly Dixon, and that they feature guest appearances on the podcast by members of the cast and the crew of the show. So it's a fun, like, behind the scenes extra. If you're a fan of the show, you can go check that out. So anyway, those are my thoughts. That's why I think that Better Call Saul is a better show than Breaking Bad. I feel like the ending was superior. I feel like just about everything about it was better. And that's just me. If you disagree with me, that's fine. Tell me why in the comments. Just be nice about it. And I appreciate you watching my video. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you want to support my channel. I appreciate it. And I will see you in the next video.